Welcome everyone to Street Smart Product Manager Live. I'm your host, Shardul. I see plenty returning audience members, so thank you for your patronage. And for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. Glad you could join us. Today, we're going to be talking about launching and growing products in the age of AI with my very special guest, Daniel Elizalde, who I will introduce shortly. Now, for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, I see a lot of familiar faces. Great to see you guys. Lots of new ones. I'm Shardul, founder of Street Smart Product Manager newsletter and host of the show. I've been around and done a bunch of stuff, startups and Fortune 100s and everything in between. I also perform and teach improv, by the way, fun fact. Now, I help undervalued product managers and leaders gain the influence, respect, and impact that they deserve. And I do that primarily through this show and my free weekly newsletter. You should definitely subscribe to it. I've been told it's pretty good. I've learned that most product management careers stagnate because of organizational chaos. And obviously, trying to deliver results in such chaos is exhausting. Now, I've enjoyed a great career in product management over 30 years, and I want that for you too. One where your expertise is recognized and your impact is undeniable because you deserve it. And that's what I do in my newsletter and on this show so that you can gain back control and transform how stakeholders perceive your value. So if you want more career advancing insights that most PMs never discover, you can subscribe at streetsmartproductmanager.com. All right, so with that, let's dive. Good, I got all that done in 4 minutes. Yes. So with that, let's dive into today's topic and introduce my special guest. Unless you've been in a cave or under a rock, the AI boom is here, right? It's impossible to miss. And yes, that image was produced by AI. So um, every company and everyone is talking about it. It's even being covered on the late night comedy shows, which is pretty amazing. Billions are being invested, and every day we see a new chart that shows a hockey stick curve of user adoption and big, bold revenue numbers. And at the ground level, LinkedIn and podcasts are flooded with these bold declarations. Product management is dead, or the role has somehow fundamentally changed. In fact, just 2 days ago, I saw a post that talked about how the quote AI product manager role is somehow unique and different and better than any other PM role before it. But if you look behind all the headlines, there is a harder truth. Every roadmap now that you look at has something labeled AI. And I've had a chance to actually review dozens of AI roadmaps this year. And what really struck me is how they're full of vision, yet almost none of them are really tied to any kind of realistic or measurable ROI. In fact, I don't know if you guys saw this, but MIT and McKinsey did studies that found that less than one-third of companies adopting AI are yet to see any kind of measurable material financial benefit. So this is not a knock against AI, and this is not about being a Luddite, but it's about trying to get to truth. What we're seeing, folks, is something that I call success theater. Companies and podcasts are talking about investment dollars and usage growth and impressive models. But when you really look carefully under the hood, here's what you find. That you find that conversion rates are in the single digits or low tens, unit economics that are brutal, margins that are at best half of traditional SaaS, and worst of all, some companies are even inflating their revenue numbers through something called round tripping, which is passing money between the same companies to fake growth and boost up valuations. So this this is the world that we as product leaders are navigating. And you're being asked to quote build with AI without any clear product strategies or business models or ROI frameworks. You're being asked to adopt AI tools and demonstrate new AI skills to show that you can move faster and be more efficient and be more productive. That you're somehow not a dinosaur, right? That heaven forbid you actually write anything anymore, right? So the question for us as product leaders becomes, has AI really changed the rules for how products are conceived, developed, launched, and grown? What really has changed versus what remains timeless? And that's why I'm really excited to introduce my guest for today, Daniel Elizalde, who's going to be helping us unpack all of this. So we're gonna get down to how do we think about building, launching, and growing products in this new age? What practices and principles remain true versus what's actually changed, and how do we connect our product work to real value, not just impressive demos and vibe coding and vanity metrics. So I called Daniel to basically help us find the signal through this chaos, and I really could think of no one better than Daniel. Daniel and I have known each other for what, 12, 15 years? What, I don't know. I can't
Yep.
remember now. Yeah, it's been a long
Well,
time. So folks, if you haven't met Daniel, he's a super smart, sharp guy. He's practical. He's an achiever. He has been through it all and seen it all, and plus he's a super nice guy, okay? He's a product executive, author, advisor, and educator with over 20 years of experience leading product innovation across industries, including climate tech, manufacturing, e-commerce, education, telecom. Whew, that's a lot. He is currently VP of Product at Reup Education and an advisor at Greentown Labs and Third Derivative, two of the leading climate tech accelerators in the US. He was previously VP and head of IoT at Ericsson and head of products at STEM, an AI-powered energy storage company. He has taught the product management and strategy for the Internet of Things course at Stanford University. He has an online course in partnership with Pragmatic Institute called Mastering B2B Product Innovation. You should go check it out. And he has trained more than 1,500 product professionals worldwide. Wow. He is the author of the book, The B2B Innovator's Map, a best-selling book on managing the uncertainty of early-stage innovation. Go buy it, folks. I've got my copy here somewhere, right there, okay? Which Daniel was very gracious enough to sign for me. So thank you, Daniel. It's a great book. Go buy it, folks. So given today's topic of product innovation in the age of AI, I couldn't think of anyone better to partner with me on this than Daniel. So Daniel, I'm so delighted to have you. Welcome.
thank you so much, Shardul. That was a really nice introduction. And I also want to say, since we know each other for so long, one of the things that excited me the most is that with so much hype and changes in messaging in the product profession, I've always found your message and your newsletter to be more grounding. And it's like, this is what it's really like to do things. And so I was very excited to come and talk about what it really looks like, as opposed to what the pundits are trying to sell us.
Awesome. Great. Your check is in the mail. Thank you. All right. So with that, Daniel, I'm actually going to turn it back over to you. Let me just get down straight to the question, right, that we're here to ask. Has the product journey really fundamentally changed in your mind, or is it still the same, but maybe with a few adjustments? And then, are those adjustments just is it just a bunch of new toys that we have, or are there actually material changes in the process or the journey that we have to now be mindful of?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so to frame a little bit of my perspective, so I've always worked in B2B type of companies, complex type of solutions like from automotive, aviation, energy, telco, education. And so when I decided to write my book, I wanted to kind of distill some of the challenges that we see, particularly in B2B, on how do we approach this? Because one of the threats throughout my career is that for one reason or another, I've always worked in cutting edge technology for what was cutting edge 20 25 years ago is no longer, but I've always worked into those things. Some things are not might not be recognizable for everybody that are industry specific, but together we went through the internet boom, and then things like mobile, and then I got really into IoT or connected devices, and then smart connected devices, and then I was leading IoT at Ericsson during the 5G hype craze. And so I've been through many of these iterations, and there's a lot of parallels. So the way I see it is it's just a constant of how technology evolves, and we need to evolve with it. I do believe that the principles remain the same, and we just have to understand what this new tool set gives us. And so, AI is a little bit different because it's not going to be very niche. It's everywhere. So there's no sidelining that I don't want to tackle into this, right? So we have to tackle it. But um, what we have in this slide is the framework that I have in my book that I call the innovator's map. And
And
I,
and
throughout
Daniel, just
years,
Daniel, if I could just jump in super
Yeah, of
quick
course.
here, just for the folks. So I know, for example, the slide says B2B, and I know you and I have worked in B2B, and certainly many folks here and who are going to eventually listen to this on YouTube are in B2B. Many folks are not.
Hmm.
Some folks are, direct to consumer or other types of models, right? And so, but would it be safe to say that the things we're going to be talking about, though, are generally true? Obviously, there's always details, context, and nuance, right? Revenue models can be, for example, very different, even within B2B, let alone B2B
Hmm.
versus D2C. But
Hmm.
generally speaking, what you're about to go through and what we're about to talk about, those principles generally, I would argue, apply just based on my own personal experience. But I don't know, would you agree or disagree with
Yeah,
that?
I do agree. And I think that the way I organized the book and the way I've organized my philosophy, so to speak, is that innovation. So, an innovation to me just means figuring out a better way to solve a problem, right? So, it's not about cutting edge technology, it's just how do we solve a problem faster, better, cheaper? And that innovation journey has these six distinct steps, whether you are in B2B, in B2C, in platforms, whether you're dealing with AI or IoT or 5G or crypto, whatever. These steps philosophically remain the same. And what I like about this approach is that it gives you just a way to socialize with people in your organization, like how you're going to approach innovation. Because usually when leaders come to us and says like, I need an AI strategy or I need a 5G strategy or go innovate. So what does that look like, right? So at least if you can articulate it. And so I've learned that the six steps, and I've trained, hundreds and if not thousands of people on this kind of stuff, are true throughout. And so the stages are strategic alignment, market discovery, user discovery, solution planning, prototyping, and early adopter, right? So these are the early stages. And so one of the theses of my book and my philosophy is that for innovation, um, we have to aim for at least 10 successful pilot customers. And that's where I call in the early adopter stage, right? So one important thing about innovation is not about MVP or those, meaningless terms, right? It's about how do you drive your company through these stages so that you can get 10 customers that are getting value from your solution, and from there you can make business decisions of what's next, right? So that is what I contemplate as the innovation journey. And so um, you and I talked about, we can talk about how AI is different or affects each of these stages from two sides, right? One is if you're building an AI product or feature, what considerations should you have? And also, what kind of tools, AI tools, are available that can help you accelerate each of the steps? So,
One question that I get a lot is even at like this first stage, or let me say it this way. Oftentimes the way it comes, and you kind of touched on this, is it's just sort of we need to have an AI strategy or we need to have AI, right? And it's a little bit of feels a little bit of cart before the horse. What kind of a conversation can you have then with leadership or with executives to kind of unpack, hey, what is the need behind this? In other words, look, are we just doing AI for the sake of AI because we want to keep up with the neighbors, or is there some fundamental strategy or driver behind this? Or said differently, could we even get there? Right? Because sometimes, let's be honest, there is something to be said about keeping up with technology trends if you're in the tech space.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think that is why I really emphasize that strategic alignment as the first step always. When I wrote the book, I hesitated on putting that as a stage at all because, like, well, companies already are aligned and they know. And when I do a lot of interviews and discovery, turns out that that's where a lot of innovation comes to die. In the traditional quote unquote way of approaching products, usually that alignment comes from, hey, we want to solve a customer problem that's going to return certain investment into the company. How do we go about it, right? It's technology agnostic usually. Now when we're talking about AI, it's very real. You now have the pressure of our executives coming in and say, what's our AI strategy? What do we do next? What do we do, right? And so what I've seen a lot of leaders do is just jump into the prototyping stage, and it's like, let me show you this tool that I can put together in 30 minutes that does this widgeted thing, right? My recommendation is let's take a step back and understand where our leadership team is coming from with that question. So is it because the competition is having some of this functionality and we're actually losing deals? Like, it's actually impacting our growth? Is it because the board is pressuring us to see some AI motion because it's going to impact our multiples for exits? So it's an investment plot. Is it more about just a PR movement? And so I think that's very important to clarify, because what you have been asked for might not be to go in and develop a new product or a new feature, right? It might be just a perspective, might be a document, might be a proof of concept, might be a talk, right? So that's very important, especially because going through the rabbit hole of building products, it takes a while, right? So that's the
Yeah,
first thing that I advise. If
yeah, I think
Go
I
ahead.
think like that's yeah, I was just gonna add like I think that's really important. I was talking to so you kind of laid it out. Is it impacting current growth? Is it about future growth? Or is it like an investment movement? I was talking to a product executive just a week or two ago. They're obviously surprised investing in AI, and I was asking, well, what's the real? Is there any real strategy driver? And he was honest, and he was like, we don't know, but I'll tell you, we are going towards a major investment event, right? He couldn't share anything confidential, but it was some kind of strategic partnership, M&A, whatever. And frankly, by having some kind of AI motion, it is going to help with the valuation. And so, there's just a pragmatic reality of sometimes you have to just, okay, if that's the driver, that's fine. It's not to say we want to discount and still not provide value to customers who are the ultimate users of our AI. Or as a maybe a quick corollary, maybe it's internal use and users. But I think having that clarity is really helpful and useful, right?
Yes, it's really helpful, and it's very useful because it sets the direction. Where do we want to go? What do we want to do? What's the effort? Because all the questions that follow are going to be important based on the direction, right? Now, let's say that the request is, no, you have to actually build something because we are losing to the competition, right? The request is we have to build something. And so here it's the next level of engagement here. This is where product leaders and product managers can really show our value, right? Instead of just making something up, you come to the table with two things that you have to have, right? One is a list of valid customer pains that your team has identified through discovery, right? And by the way, I'll give a shout out to Mike Blakesley here, because I've learned a lot about what I know from the discovery through him. So thank you, Mike. Um, and so you have to have those problems, right? And you have to have a point of view of saying, well, we believe these problems are impactful enough for us to explore and invest. And these problems, we believe, can be good candidates to address through AI, right? So bring the problems and say this could be addressed with AI. Now, in order to say this could be addressed with I think the challenge on us is we have to understand to some level how the technology works, um, what can it do, what it cannot do, so that we can have those propositions. Because if we just say AI, well, what exactly are we talking about, and what does that mean? And that's what the discussion is, the third step, right? So first, what's the goal? Then this is the problem through the AI. And now, if you get clearance and say, yeah, sure, let's explore that, explore, not build, let's explore that, you need to have that clarity of where your company stands today so that you can get that alignment with leadership. Do we have the people that know how to build AI solutions in-house? No. Are we going to train them? Can we get budget to train them? Like, what horizon do you want this? Do you want this, in 3 weeks? It's not going to happen, right? What is the priority of this against other things, right? Are the other teams, not only engineering and product and design, ready to do something like this, but is the rest of the organization ready to take it? Customer success, sales, right? So all those discussions are very, very important. Laying it out and showing that leadership, because one of the things that I also noted in the questions here, AI solutions are non-deterministic, right? So you can't, it's not like just build it and it behaves like this. They need a lot of tuning, right? I heard this great quote from Teresa Torres in one of her podcasts that, most of companies say it takes an hour to build a great prototype, but it takes 8 months to get something that actually works. So
Yeah.
having those discussions with leadership early on and say, okay, if we want to go on this route, Going back to my diagram, we're going to have to go through these stages of market discovery, user discovery, solution planning, and prototyping. But the solution planning and prototyping, it's going to be beefy, and we might not be the best company equipped to do that. There's going to be a lot of discovery, vendor evaluation. We need money for tools, for training, for consulting, all that. Right? So that paints a picture that at least you can drive that innovation forward with your leadership team because you know what you're talking about. You might not know the specifics, and all of us are new in this space, but at least you have the pillars on like, okay, this is how we're going to approach it, and we're going to go step by step, and I'll keep you informed.
Yeah, I think there's a great point there about, well, there's a number of great points you made. One that jumped out was, just because we have a weekend prototype doesn't mean that now we have a ready to go, sellable, scalable product for the marketplace, right? And that's just on the product development side, let alone the other things you mentioned about organizational preparedness and readiness, right? There's Daniel, there's a number of great questions already lighting up in the chat. Let me just get to a couple of them, I think, based on just the stuff you've talked about so far. So, um, so like Deep Row, and I'm going to read these out loud, folks, especially for folks who end up just watching the replay. Um, Deep Row is asking, I'm assuming you meant identifying the early adopters before ideally getting into solution planning. That's an interesting question. When do you go about identifying those early adopters? That's a good
Yeah,
question.
that is a perfect segue to the next topic, right? So if we talked about in the diagram of the innovation journey, we talked about the first stage being strategic alignment.
Yeah.
The next step is what I call market discovery. And what that really means is understanding, again, because my book is B2B, from a company perspective, who is your ideal customer, the market size, those kind of things. And then the people in those companies that actually have the pain that you have identified. So you're going to do a lot of discovery to understand from a company perspective, but from your champion or your buyer, it's also called, I call them champions. Um, what is the pain and what is the need, and you get all that discovery, right? And you need to do about 10 to 15 of those interviews to kind of hone in to make sure that there is a pain, there's a there. Those people will become your early adopters, right? You want to build those relationships, and then because you're discovering very early on that these people actually have the pain, they are helping you articulate it, and then you're going to carry them throughout the life cycle of the innovation journey. They are the ones who are going to see the early prototypes and give feedback. They are the ones who are going to help you with the planning. They are the ones who are going to sign up for the early adopters, and hopefully they're the ones who are going to convert. So you need that from the very, very early on, but it comes as part of discovery, right? Because you need to make sure that these people have the pain.
So bringing them along the journey. And I've done that. And certainly in the B2B space, you can run pilot programs or customer co-development programs. They're
Mhm.
called co-development, but we're doing the development really. But they are bringing in maybe their resources, their people, right? Spending time. So one of the last companies I worked at, Gen AI company in the healthcare space, we didn't know what we were doing. So we did a pilot with a very forgiving customer. We would get on weekly calls. They were willing to share with us a lot of their data. They gave us a lot of feedback, and then we actually implemented it and piloted it in a very limited control environment. So, and then of course, eventually they became an early adopter. But the other thing that it did for us was it was a good testimonial and case study for us to use when we actually then went forward with like our official beta program with other customers. And you can probably do, of course, on the B2C side, I know people do beta programs and things like that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And so, one thing that is interesting to think about here is that, we always have to engage with these buyers and customers to understand their pains. Some of the notes that I wrote here for this conversation is, so what's different in the era of AI, right? Some of the things that now I like to dive a little bit deeper is understand their perception or their company perception about AI.
Mm.
What is their level of adoption, right? Are they familiar with it? Are they afraid of it? Do they trust it? Have terrible experience with vendors, right? So as you're planning a solution, you want to understand, the sentiment of your audience to figure out how you can position things. the level of involvement of expertise can tell you whether this is just a, let's say, a software only solution, or this is a software and services solution, right? So just make sure that you serve your customer. It's not about throwing technology over the wall. There's also this big conversation about data ownership,
Yes.
how vendors use the data. So you might have some plans that says, oh, we're going to do this AI thing to gather a ton of data from them so we can train our models and monetize it. The moment you start engaging with your customers, they might have a very different opinion. And so that model might not work, or you would have to adapt, right? So those are the kinds of discussions that you're going to have with them and you're going to learn with them throughout, right? Other couple of comments here, like how do they think about pricing models? Because we are, most companies are used to like a SaaS pricing model,
Right.
a subscription, right? Yearly. But now, what about the credit model that's very popular within AI? So all of a sudden, you have a variable component. CFOs hate that variable component because you can't estimate how much it's going to cost the solution, right? So you have to understand how that's going to be perceived, who's going to be involved in the buying decisions, and what are some of the strings that you can pull. And I have a specific example about this, but I'll pause for Shardul comment and questions.
No, let's go. Yeah, go through your example. That's great.
Yeah, so one of the specific examples that I faced not long ago was about how do you handle personal identifiable information. And so,
Yeah.
I work in education right now. And so a lot of the information we have is from students that is protected. And so as I build my solutions that have some AI components, I have to think about how is that going to be managed. But also, as I engage with vendors that are selling me their solutions, we have to consider that personalized information might go into that. And so you have to have those conversations. And so, for example, as I was evaluating some AI solutions to help my team analyze discovery, etc., there was this talk about, well, this is going to be consuming personalized information. Therefore, we have to be in a regulated sandbox, right, for
Yeah.
FERPA compliance. Well, most companies don't do FERPA compliance, they do HIPAA, which is like more, right? And
In
so these
healthcare, yeah.
companies have to offer a HIPAA compliant plan. And it turns out that that plan is way more expensive because it's a lot more expensive to serve. And so all of a sudden, I had to evaluate, is the pain that I have big enough to justify that big of an expense? Nah, maybe not, right? And so we ended up not going with that. And so as we build our own solutions, we might say, yeah, it's going to be an AI, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. But we're going to have to provide environments that are HIPAA compliant, contracts that are HIPAA compliant. The deployment of that is more complicated. And it's going to have a delta in cost for us to serve that revenue. Is that value going to be enough that the customers are going to say, yes, the value is so big that it's a no-brainer? Probably not. So what does that do to your margins, right? So thinking about all those implications, super important, right? Because the data and privacy and safety it's a thing and it's very expensive.
So, you talked about customer pain, you talked about data privacy, and you touched on something that I think is really interesting and not talked about enough within product management. So we have our model. We're trying to sell some kind of AI feature or product to customers. And let's say we get their buy-in. Yeah, you can use our data to train your models, right? So let's say we cover the PII, all those concerns, right? Customer agrees. But here's the thing that I don't see talked about, but I think is a real issue that in product management we need to crack the code on, which is once we suck in that data, how does that affect our compute costs? And as a result, how does that affect our margins? So when we think about pricing AI capabilities, right? Or whatever the ROI model is on it, because the old rules of SaaS now they don't exactly apply apples to apples with the addition of AI, and now especially with this added element of we are now also consuming our customers' data into our models, right? So that left alone to its own devices that can drive up our compute costs, AWS costs, all those things. And before you know it, yay, we won this customer contract. They're on board, but it turns out that customer is completely unprofitable
Right.
because our models with sucking in those data our costs have just gone through the roof, and we cannot sustain that pricing. So, and a bit of a convoluted question, I guess, on my part, but that's one that I don't see talked about. Is that something you've wrestled with, or how
Yeah,
what do you think
I
about that?
wrestle a lot with it, and I do it in the later in the prototyping stage. But I can just tell you a thought because I have an example for that I thought might be applicable for this. And this example is when I was head of product at STEM, so we were doing energy storage, AI-powered energy storage systems for buildings connected to the internet for supply the grid, et cetera, et cetera. At the time, those big batteries that go into buildings, they were extremely expensive. And so when you think about business models, the model that we have was good. The pain was really, really strong. Customers were really interested in buying this. Our solution was great. But the problem was that the margins were super small because the cost of the battery was huge, right? And there's
Right.
a point where that cost of delivering the solution, right? Whether it is compute or data storage on the cloud, or in this case, hardware batteries, the cost of delivering that solution surpasses the value that you're delivering to the customer. And at some point, we had those conversations with a few customers, right? It's like for a 2 or 3% improvement, this doesn't make sense, right? Just the cost of going through the contracting and installation doesn't make sense. Now, the interesting thing though is that the model was forward looking. We did a lot of discovery and we had a lot of conversations with the battery vendors. And we
Mm,
knew their roadmaps, and we knew that the cost of those batteries as they scale was going to go down and down and down. By the time I was there, the cost had gone down about 80%, and I think now it's like in the 150%. So that asset, it's a lot cheaper. And so all of a sudden, the margin is much bigger for us, right? Because now you can deliver that same value with a lot less cost. And so from the early stages, you could see a path to profitability because you knew that the trends of energy storage costs were going to go down, right? In AI, it's kind of interesting, right? The compute is going through the roof. I read somewhere that OpenAI is spending $3 for every dollar they make, right?
yes.
And if
Which also, by the way, I mean, maybe I'm revealing a bias, but that could be just what they're saying in the public domain.
True, right? So if that's what they're
It could
saying,
be
imagine what it
worse.
is. But it's like, is there a path for compute power to go down so that all of a sudden your solution makes sense in terms of margins, matching the level of pain that customers are willing to pay for? I don't know, right? Because there's that compute, there's the storage, and all the things that go around it. So the point here is to have those discussions with your executive team and back of the napkin say, you know what, our solution is going to have this, it's going to continue to cost this. Do we see a path for profitability? Because one of the things that I advocate in the prototyping stage is testing whether your solution solves the customer problem. And oftentimes, as long as the customer is happy with the solution, doesn't have to be AI, right? So at that point, that's innovation, right? You say, okay, there's this problem. In my book, I have several examples where I pivoted technologies because it was much cheaper to do it this way than this way. And the value created for the company and the customer was there with the right margins. And so that is important to say at the very early to your leadership team. We might be able to get a solution and we might make it viable, but we don't know, right? So we're going to explore and we're going to work together and we're going to be very transparent. And here's the why, right? So as product leaders, I think that's a lot of the AI education that we need, right? You know, the unit costs, the value props, the how to drive engineering teams, what's the effort, the tooling around it, so that we can make a business decision of if we're going to go through this, we're going to try to make it work. We don't know. And we're going to try to make it profitable. We don't know. But we put it on the table. I'm really struggling. I had a discussion yesterday with a product leader about
Yeah.
like the trends in Silicon Valley. I was like, now you vibe code in the morning, you ship in the evening. And it's like, that's insane, right? And so
Yeah.
we have to get away from that hype and look at the reality of this and focus on what the goal of our role is, which is, can we make money for the company?
Yeah. I think just as there's some comments in the chat, just because we're shipping faster, does that mean we're actually providing value?
Yeah.
You
And the
know?
shipping faster was never the problem, to be honest, at least in my experience, right? The problem was
Yeah, I think we solved that problem. Maybe we're incrementally a bit even faster, but we solved that problem years ago. That was the whole point of Agile, I guess, which was to
yeah.
be able to help us ship faster. We have a bunch of questions and comments in the chat, folks. I will get to them. Thanks for sharing them. I'm gonna get to them. There's a couple of things though I think I want to really call out and highlight, Daniel, what you were just talking about. You gave the story about the energy cost, storage costs, right? And you were talking about you talk about how you went to the battery vendors. And see that I think that is such a great example because in product management, oftentimes we get really fixated on features and the development of features, and we're all over the development cost, maybe, right? But the thing that we need to do also in product management, and folks, this is a little bit of me segueing into a bit of career smartness, if you will, is we have to look at the whole product. So we have to look at everything that it takes to deliver that product in the marketplace. And I think that was a great example of, you weren't getting down. It wasn't about feature function. It was about, well, wait, our battery costs from our battery suppliers, how is that impacting our ability to ultimately profitably deliver the value we're promising to our customers? So it's not just about, hey, customer, we want to give you something that's actually effective and valuable and it's going to solve your problem. Of course, that's a big part of it. But at the end of the day, as a business, it's got to be profitable. And so when we're looking at that, we've got to be able to look at those aspects as well. So I think just the story about uh, partnering with the battery vendors with their roadmaps and getting those aligned, like to me, that yeah, that is a product management challenge that we have to solve. The other thing that I want to highlight is how, both in strategic alignment, and you talked about market discovery and we're getting to user discovery. In all of your examples, you're continuously going back to leadership. So to go back to our sort of flippant start, where leadership or executive comes and says, "Build us AI," or what's our, build our AI feature, right? And I think there's a bit of like, so people panic, and I get it, it's understandable, right? The hippo has come and just made this declaration. And then we scramble to like figure out prototype and build features and all of that. But there is value in going back, and it's not so much questioning them, but providing these insights that you're talking about, saying, okay, great, got it. Now, by the way, I went and talked to a bunch of customers, right? Here's what I'm hearing. Here's their perception of AI, right? I did some research maybe on our compute costs and things like that. Here are some of the considerations we need to have. So it's not like you're necessarily saying no, or and it's also better, by the way, than going on LinkedIn and just doing a flame rant. By the way, don't do that. But you're now providing real strategic business value back to the leadership team, right? To make them aware of, hey, yeah, hey, AI, got it. We got to do it. Here are some things we need to be aware of as we go along, though, as we do it. So we're doing it smartly. And if we want to make compromises on the risks in the initial stages, that's cool. We did that once. We took a margin hit in the short term, but know that we're going to have to pay that penalty later on. If strategically we're on board with that, cool. But let's just be aware. And generally, you do get the acknowledgement, the credibility is that, you know what, okay, you've got a good strategic mind, you get it. We have more faith that we have frankly more faith in you as the product leader, product manager.
Yep. And you mentioned the going back to a strategic alignment. To me, like the diagram doesn't look as pretty if I draw it like that. But in reality, all the stages sit on top of strategic alignment. So you have to be checking back with leadership and keeping your peers involved throughout the journey, right? During user discovery, during market discovery, during solution planning, because this is going to affect multiple people in the company. And you have to keep that alignment throughout. It's very easy to lose it, right? So it's not one thing and done at the beginning. In the book, I weave it into everything, but just from the diagram perspective, think about it like if there's not that alignment, nothing else works. And the role of the product leader is to keep that alignment, and the role of the product team is to navigate that
Yeah.
innovation journey, right?
So let's see, Daniel, we cover the user discovery uh
We haven't. I think because we I just want to make a note there so we can move a little bit faster. But so we talked about building the products themselves, but what about the tools that are out there that can help us, right? There's a lot of different
Yes.
tools that can help us accelerate how we do things. One of the interesting things about the user discovery stage, right? This is where we go to the actual users that are going to use the solution and understand their needs, their pains, etc. In the past, 15 years ago, we used to, you know, go visit these people and just like a researcher and I don't know, a designer, and interview them and take notes, and then you
Right.
come back and you put all the post-its. And what's incredible today is you can jump on a Zoom call and you can record it and you can put it into an AI tool to synthesize things, and you can accelerate a lot of that, right? That's great. The one thing that I want to be very mindful, though, is that there's all these trends about like, what about synthetic personas? And we can train a model so that we don't have to go to the users and we can just get that. No, right? Unless you're building for the machine, right? If you're building for humans, you have to talk to humans. These tools are going to accelerate your analysis, your insights, but you have to do that because that is where the differentiated experience comes from. Because everybody has access to all these tools. And these tools don't have emotions or feel pains or have a life outside. And so you want to get to that bottom of it. And so synthetic personas are not a replacement. And so even
Yeah.
in this era, it's easy to default to these tools to do the work for you. Getting monetary value and business value for the company and understanding the pace of the users, that's the job. You can't outsource that to a machine, right? So
Right.
that is the job. So I want to be very, very emphatic about that because I think that's where the secret sauce is. That's where you're going to find the nuggets that are going to make or break a potential great solution.
I never heard that term synthetic personas, but that makes a ton of sense. I guess, it makes sense to pursue synthetic personas if synthetic personas are your customer at the end of the day. If we're gonna end up selling things to AI, I suppose, but who knows? Maybe that future will come.
Yeah, exactly.
That
Maybe in
to
the
me
future.
is akin to, I've talked to tech founders. They were basically former engineers and now they're founding a company. And they would engage in, this is years ago, right? They do their A/B testing and they do their surveys. They do all kinds of stuff, but talk to customers.
Mhm.
And then they would launch their product, and of course they would, have lukewarm at best results until finally they were forced to like go and talk to, and they talked to five, and they were like, oh, okay. And really, it's just hiding, right? It's because it can be uncomfortable, right? Especially if you come from that kind of tech or engineering background or whatever, it can be uncomfortable talking to customers. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Nothing is going to replace if you're selling to humans, you got to go talk to humans. Cool. Awesome. Let's see. So we're
Since we
doing
are,
pretty good on time. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so I was thinking maybe why don't we talk a little bit about the solution planning stage? Because I think there's a lot of meat there that I would like to share and
Yeah,
discuss.
and I think there's a lot of questions that are in the chat as well that I've been holding people at bay on, so I'd love to get those as well. So let's do that. Yeah.
Okay, so the next stage, once you have your discovery, basically the first three stage, alignment, market discovery, user discovery, is to understand the problem. And then the following stages, solution planning, prototyping, early adopters, it's about delivering a solution that solves that problem, right? So
Right.
assuming that you're in the solution planning stage, um, here, the first thing is you have to prioritize from all the things that you heard, like what is the one or two use cases that you really want to focus on, right? That's normal product management. Now, the interesting thing, what makes me think about how is this different when building AI products? There's a few things, right? That's where we have to learn more about the technology and make sure that our counterparts in other departments know that. Because, for example, let's say that you're thinking about a Gen AI solution through LLMs. Okay, which one? Do you use ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Meta, open source? Why? How? Right? In that planning, you're thinking about how you're going to build this, right? What other tools do you need for observability, for tracking, for evals, right? What else are you going to need? You have to have that discussion. If you were building something known, like for example, you're a SaaS company and you're just building a new SaaS product, or you're building a new module within that, your tech stack, all that is known. You have the people, you have the licenses. Here, you might not. And so, what do you need? And who's going to do it? Right? Who's going to do the evals? Who's going to do the train? Is it the PM team? Is it the engineering? Is it right? All that you're just going to have to discuss and discover within your company. One of the big things that I noticed, and I discovered this and I experienced this also when I was head of product at STEM, where it was an AI at the edge for the energy storage.
Yeah.
It's about the data, right? So it's very easy to think, oh, we're going to do this solution, we train a model to perform this output, and off we go. How are you going to train it? Do you have the data to train it? Do you have access to that data? Do you have permission to use that data for training? And that could be a make or break, right? That's why in solution planning for AI, I really emphasize this, because if you don't have the data readily available, then that's going to be a first step, and you might not be able to get it, and then your initiative dies. And that's okay, right? But you have to think about this, because if you
Right.
don't have data,
You're selling vaporware.
mhm. Yeah, exactly. And that data is what makes you unique and differentiated, right? Because if you're going to be sitting on top of a general model, let's say ChatGPT, and you're just going to have a like a bland API and a UI to talk to it, well, anybody can do that, right? Might as well just bypass your app and just talk directly to ChatGPT for $20 a month. But
Honestly,
like
the customer themselves could probably do that.
exactly, that's what they do, right?
Yeah.
But if you're creating something on top and you have some, fine tuning, or you have a library of very particular IP that you can use through RAG techniques, that's when the value arises. And so, therefore, at that point, AI is it's an enhancement tool for your uh, IP, and
Right.
that you can create a differentiated solution that you can charge for, right? But unless you have that, you don't have a lot to offer. So that's very critical for the product team. And I do believe the product team is responsible for having those conversations and figure out what do we have of data, how do we get it, how do we store it. And if a company is new to this, it might also bubble down to like, so let's say that we can get this data, we can buy it or whatever. Where do we put it? We might not have the infrastructure to store that data. We might need to get Snowflake and different interfaces, and we might, right? So it's a thing, right? So all of a sudden,
Yeah.
the vibe code in the morning, ship in the afternoon, kind of changed a little bit, right? All
Yeah.
these are conversations. And then your VP of engineering or your CTO might say, oh, that's not a big deal. We know how to do it. Great. But at least you have the conversation and you can move on, right? And the other thing that I recommend really strongly in the solution planning is collaborate with legal. What are your contracts
Yeah.
going to look like? Because, for example, let's say that you have in B2B contracts with existing customers, and now you're going to have an AI model that is going to tap data, or if it's an agent, is going to peruse their enterprise systems. Wait a second, that's not in the contract. And so you might need to revisit your contract. And the moment that you tell sales, hey, we need to revisit the contract with this 500 Fortune 500 company because of this feature, they're going to say, you're crazy. We're not
Correct.
going to do that. Right? And so
Yeah.
that those are discussions that get lost in the translation of everything that is needed to launch a solution of this type that the product team needs to advance. And I'm in touch with my legal counsel and my chief financial officer to like ask these questions, right? And oftentimes it's like, well, I don't know, what do we do, right? We're all
Yeah.
figuring it out. But I think the leadership from our perspective is to bring up the questions. Like, I don't have the answers, but I can think of a lot of questions, right?
That is an excellent point. It gets us right back to the whole question about data sovereignty and protection and whatnot. And in fact, so just a quick 30-second story for everyone here. When the company I was at, we were doing the Gen AI product, we got into pretty interesting discussions about, okay, our product takes in customer data into our model. What happens if the customer decides to cancel their contract? So do we owe that data back? We probably do because of their data. But here's the other thing. What does that do to our product value proposition? Because we've now just trained our model. Our product is based on the value of our model, which has partially been trained on the customer's data, which is now going away.
Mhm.
Does our value proposition, will it continue to hold? Right? So yeah, really, really interesting stuff.
And that's where, if that is the value proposition, that's where you negotiate with your legal to update the contract and then work with sales to have the customer agree to sign this revised version of the T's and C's that says if they leave, you can continue using their data, right? That's the path. Super hard, right?
Super hard. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if that's the model, then you can see how you need to involve all of a sudden legal and probably senior executives to have those conversations. And maybe they're going to have to, like, if you're thinking truly of a business model and you can monetize that data and those models, maybe you are okay with giving a discount to this renewal of this big company next year in exchange for them to sign in the new T's and C's because it's valuable for you, right? But again, that is the leadership that we need to figure out in product about how are we going to make money with this, right? And what are all the
Yeah.
implications?
So, Daniel, I'd love to get to, before we run out of time, I'd love to get to questions. Um, do we want to, let's do this. Let's just do a quick wrap up of key takeaways, if that works for you.
Yeah.
And then let's get to, because the chat just lit up, like there's tons of comments and questions. I'd love to get to them. Folks, also just a quick time check. Um, at 1 o'clock, if you need to go, then obviously go. I'm certainly happy to stay on to answer any questions that we may not have gotten to. So if you're able to stay, that's great. Daniel, I don't want to hold you, but if you got to go at 1, that's okay. But if you can
I can
stay,
stay for a little bit.
great. All right. So why don't we just do a quick wrap up and let's dive into those questions.
Great. So just quick takeaways. I guess the main thing is that the core principles haven't changed. So it's not about AI, it's about delivering customer value. The difference is that we need to understand this new technology with all of their implications, not at the engineering level, but at the business level, technical enough to have the conversations, because we're going to need to be having these discussions with the rest of the organization. That's what's different. But the core principles about what we're trying to do have not changed. I've seen this with so many other technologies, right? Number two is that understand the complete innovation journey. A lot of people focus on like, oh, quick prototyping, and we can have this quick prototype. Well, as you saw today, well, focus on understanding that alignment from the company. Focus about understanding your buyers and your users and how you're going to plan to execute. And like the whole journey is super important. Don't get distracted with the shiny object of what the technology can do. That's cool, but that's just a demo, and it's incredible technology, don't get me wrong, but it's really hard to build a business around just that. Um, and so, as I said, alignment is key,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you are new or your company is new to this kind of initiatives, setting the right expectations that it's going to take time, that it's going to need a lot of fine tuning, that the models, slide after a while. So somebody always has to be looking at them, the legal, all the things that we talked about. Set those expectations, carry those expectations forward.
Brilliant. All right. So folks, if you want to get in touch with Daniel, here's his contact info. I will email it out as well, so you will have it. And just so you know, there's an AMA coming tomorrow that I'm doing. So if you want more time with me, you just go to streetsmartproductmanager.com/events and you'll see a link to most of these. Not all of them are set up, but we've got an AMA coming up, a roundtable, and then of course we've got a number more of these Street Smart Product Manager live episodes. Scott Burleson, David Bland, Joe Golly, Teague Hopkins, all the way into January and beyond. So lots of more great stuff. But with that, let me jump into questions. Again, if you have to drop, go ahead. But we'll get to as many as we can. So give me a second here. All right, so I'm going to go scroll back to the top. Debayan. Debayan had a question. Many companies are rushing to, quote, add AI to their products, but few are changing how they actually build and make decisions. In your experience, what separates teams that truly integrate AI into their product culture and decision making from those that just run a few flashy pilots that fade away? Great question.
That's a good question. I think the companies that are successful or they're going to be successful are the ones who contemplate the complete innovation journey, and they understand the implications and how this technology impacts the multiple teams, and always have an eye on monetization as opposed to just incorporating for the sake of incorporating. So I think it's about that clarity.
Yeah. Depending, I know you got another one, but let me come back to your other question. Mark's question is, do you typically regard product as responsible for creating the prototype, and how much actual AI technical expertise should be expected from product managers? Great. Boy, man,
Yeah.
LinkedIn is flooded with this stuff. What do you say,
Yeah.
Daniel?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I mean, I'm going to tell you two answers, right? Um, the product manager should first and foremost figure out the business side of things and the customer side of things and the value side of things. Um, if your company has designers and other folks in the team that can help, maybe they are the ones who do it, right? Um, I think it's helpful for product managers to know like how to train a model and how to do prototyping, just because of the familiarity with the technology, so that you can speak more confidently with all the different departments in the organization, right? I remember when I was advising companies on IoT, and like only the engineering team knew IoT, and then you talk to everybody else and nobody has an idea of how to even spell it. It's complicated, right? And so I think the more we can be hands-on, not to do, but to understand and be fluent with it, so that we can understand the trade-offs, that's what I do. Like now, I'm a technologist at heart, so like I play with this stuff because I like it. Um, but I don't expect that my PMs would be in my current setup. I don't expect my PMs to do those prototypes. I lead design as well, so I do expect my designers to evaluate how can AI make us better in the context of our company and our products, not just for the sake of it, right? And they will explore and they'll let us know.
Yeah, my take on that is, Mike, so I think prototype has become a bit of a bloated word. I think there was always a place for certainly any product manager who's working on a product that has some kind of user experience or UI, right? There is an element of just sketching out the idea visually in some fashion. So if you I'm definitely going to show my age now, dial the clock way back, like, we would even just do like PowerPoint sketches, right? Just to kind of this way. Now, that's nowhere near, forget finished product. That is not the kind of thing that I would just hand to engineer and say, okay, you just have to go code and build this, right? Um, Maybe vibe coding or some of the new AI tools allow us to accelerate that stuff better. I've worked with some terrific designers, and that's a whole other thing we could probably get into, is the value of designers and design team. But I think this expectation that the product manager is basically just going to build a prototype that we can just like that, with a snap of our fingers, now make it into a fully functional, scalable, robust 5.9 SLA type product is kind of is dreaming a little bit, right?
Yeah. And it's also
So
the reality that you also have to understand, what are you prototyping? Like what are you looking to accomplish? Because if you're early in the discovery and you're trying to understand whether this potential solution matches the customer problem, maybe some wireframes are more conducive, because a prototype has the disadvantage that it looks like software, and so they might fixate on the colors. Oh, this button, what is it? What's on this pull down? It's like, no, no, don't look at that. You can't, right? So our stakeholders, our customers are not designers, are not PMs, so they don't understand the difference what we're trying to show them. I've had some stakeholders that see some prototypes that look like our product and we're showing futures, and they're like, I don't understand what you're asking me to do here, right? This feels like a finished thing. Are you just saying if I like it? Are you like... So depending on where you are and what you're trying to accomplish, a drawing, a whiteboard drawing, a wireframe, and move forward, right? But that's the progression. And you have to understand the context of your company. Some companies are way more advanced, and from day one, they can do a Figma prototype and they understand what they're asking and what they're looking for. Most companies, in my experience, don't.
Dippero's got a good question. Why are we not having more open conversations with customers up front? Sure, Mr. Customer, I can do this for you using AI, but it will cost you X. And is this profitable for both you and me? So Dipper, yeah, I know you wrote a lot, but I think that's the gist of your question. Basically, he's asking, why not make the customer a part of this validate the hype and push back
Yeah.
on the
Can
SLT, senior
I
leadership team? So
request
that's a really
permission
great question. Yeah, Dipper, go ahead. You
request
want to
permission
add?
to speak out? Yeah. So yeah, you captured the essence of it, but to Daniel, what you just described, my question is also showing the prototype and everything else is great. That's essential. But to your point, it gives kind of a fake idea of what the reality is going to be. But more importantly, yes, this can do all of these things. But if I can get the buy-in, like, okay, we can build all this thing for you, but it's going to cost you X, then I'm doing a reality check way early in the life cycle, then having later on. And my other part of like my second big blurb, sorry for that, was who else can help me fight this battle? Because I can't do this on my own. I've tried that, I failed, right? So I need either my sales teams freaks out because everyone's selling AI. I need to sell AI. Can you do that, right? But I need data to prove that you actually lost deals because you didn't have AI. And the other competitor is actually gone forward because of what their AI is or what their AI adoption was. So unless I have all of that stuff, I can't, I don't stand a chance against my VC or my SLT or nobody. So what do you recommend?
Those are super great points. So I think in my book, I do advocate of having those discussions with your champions early on. And when you're showing them prototypes, you're also testing for the willingness to pay. And so all that is, I deeply advocate that because that's before you build anything, right? So we should be doing more of that. And from a leadership perspective, empowering your teams to have those conversations, right? To your other point, one of the things that has worked for me is the setup of this from the very, very beginning and strategic alignment, which means this needs to be set up as an initiative that is about exploration, right? And so the challenge that I've seen is that if you don't frame it as exploration, then in the minds of the executives and other people, it is normal development. And so all the other teams are going to fire as normal, right? The salespeople are going to do their thing, the marketing people are going to do their thing. But if you set it as an exploration and say, this might or might not see the light of day, people get that buy-in, and then leadership can help you and say, okay, talk to the sales guy. We can have a narrative with this customer that they are preferred and we're showing them futures, but there's no expectation, but you want to do discovery with them, right? And so it's a lot less risky, but it has to be a mindset that all the way to the CEO or whoever leads that supports that, yes, this is an exploration and it might fail. And that's the honestly the core premise of my book, which is like we are exploring, a lot of things are going to fail, but calling that gives us a lot of leeway to be non-threatening when we talk to customers, when we talk to marketing, because we're exploring and this might not happen, right? Easier said
Dipper,
than done in some contexts because some contexts don't have the idea of exploration and everything is just like development and out. But that's the initial buy-in of it's like, hey, we need a special way of doing this because there are too many unknowns to put it through the normal pipeline.
Dipper, two things you mentioned that kind of stood out. And so I can share two quick stories. Maybe they'll help. So one is you're kind of touching on, hey, it's great to get the user's validation on the product itself, right? Hey, is this tech going to, or this solution gonna, is it useful to you? But there's another element of, are you gonna pay for it? And there's a testing the pricing. So as a quick example, we did a pilot program with a customer. It was a large healthcare institution. Now the purpose of that pilot was to prove out the product itself, some of the workflow considerations. This was an enterprise scale deployment, and some other ROI metrics that the customer was interested in, right? So in parallel, we were having separate conversations with folks who we identified as potential early adopters to test pricing. And because we had about two or three different concepts and we just weren't sure, we did the math on our spreadsheets behind the scenes. And then we just, tried to contact the right buyer or who we thought would be the ultimate buyer and then test pricing, right? And of course, as you can imagine, our first five conversations were, right? But but the signal we got was, yes, I would pay for it. I'm interested because I have these problems and I'm willing to pay to solve it, but your pricing doesn't work for me, right? So that's one quick story I can share where, yeah, you have to test pricing. The other one that you mentioned, which I found really interesting. So this is non-AI, pretty classic. Sales comes and says, so a competitor came out, press release, all this fanfare, this shiny new feature. And guess what? They started getting a lot of attention. Everyone started freaking out. Sales started freaking out. We have to have this feature. We're not competitive anymore, right? So there was a tremendous amount of pressure. So we said, okay, if we built this, will we actually close deals? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We had to bite the bullet. We built the feature. We cheated, by the way. We didn't build the full thing. We kind of built it like half because we didn't believe it. And here's what happened. So our pipeline got fatter, but our deal rate did not change. Now, this was hard to prove, by the way, it was a ton of work, but it was a great case we could make back to leadership to basically say, hey, just because the competitor came out with this shiny feature doesn't mean we're actually going to close more deals. And sure enough, while our pipeline metrics at the top, SQLs went up because now every customer wanted to talk to us, our actual close rate didn't change, which means our actual bookings and ARR numbers and all that didn't fundamentally change as a result of having half the feature, to be honest. So, you know,
Yeah, and can I make just one other very um, tangential point to what you just described, Shardul, is like this is from a recent experience. Don't forget sales comp, right? Like the
yeah.
question to leadership is like, when do you want to realize that? Because like any new product, whether it's AI or non-AI, the first year is just traction, second year is growth, third year is when you get the ROI coming out. If the leadership experience is like, I only have a 6 month attention span and I want like 50x return at the end of 6 months, ain't happening. So um, walk in with that reality, knowing what you can do, because um,
Yeah, yeah, you're
the
yeah,
math
yeah,
isn't going to work out, basically.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and that's a really excellent point. And I think that during the solution planning, that's where you can have those discussions with leadership and say, we need 10 pilot customers to try this out, but we want them to be paid pilots. And then you can test different pricing with them and see which one bites. But also, hey, I need a temporary comp plan for one sales guy to help us close those early pilots, right? So it's a different thing. It's not part of the normal, because as a product team, you can't go and actually charge for something that has to go through the company channels. And so you're going to need that support from sales, let's say, and then the comp of that one person that is part of the innovation team that is closing those innovation deals that look nothing like the other ones, right? And each one might be different, but again, you're exploring.
Uh, Daniel, you're good to keep going? There's,
Yes.
there's,
Yeah. Well,
okay,
let
so
me check.
Prob, hopefully I'm saying your name right. Prob is asking, is building incrementally losing its value in the eyes of B2B customers now that vibe coding is in vogue? Have customer expectations changed to the extent that delivering features incrementally like an agile is no longer satisfies them? I have my own opinions on this, but Daniel, what do you think?
Um, I don't think so. I don't think customers care how we deliver things, how we do things. They care, are we solving their problem? Right? So I think that at least in some of the industries that I work with, it might be frowned upon because, this is like you vibe coded your way to like a, cybersecurity for a nuclear reactor. No, no, right? So depends on your industry, but oftentimes they don't care, right? They might say there might be some, you know, technologist in the company that says PM is dead, we need to buy cut everything. The buyers, the person that is putting their neck out to ask for budget to bring in this solution, they don't care. Is this delivering value? And that's the partnership between product marketing and sales to have that narrative, right? How it's built, yeah, you can sprinkle some AI dust, but they don't care. That's been my experience. I'd love to hear from others.
Yeah, I don't know if this building incrementally and shipping faster was ever really truly a customer pull thing. I think it was more of a us push thing. And there was a lot of value in that. I think though certainly like like I've worked in regulated industries. I know Daniel, you have as well. Healthcare is a great example. Um, and like I was at one health tech company and we were all about ship fast, build incrementally. And I lost track of the number of customer calls I was on where customers just they screamed at me. I still remember there were a couple of physicians. I got on a call with them and they were like, listen, you don't understand. Every time, the only time I experience your product, this was a telehealth product, is when I get on the call with the patient. And if you have moved, I'm going from memory on how to use your product. If you've just moved a button a few places to the left, it throws me off and I don't have time. I got to get to the patient. So you can't just change things like that. And that was like a huge wake up call. So we literally, even though we had the capability with engineering, DevOps, and all of that to ship more than once a day. And we deliberately dialed it back to ship once a month based on customer feedback. This was in healthcare because they just couldn't absorb it, let alone this is even putting aside all the regulatory concerns and testing and validation and all of that that often goes into it. This is just customer feedback, right?
Yeah.
So I think like it's not really in my mind about agile or incremental build or whatever or anything like that. I think you just have to be savvy and empathetic to your customers' ability to just even absorb changes. But the other point is no matter what we do, whether you release daily, monthly, quarterly, whatever, at the end of the day, and certainly when you get to some of these kinds of industries that Daniel talked about, that I've talked about, you have to produce tangible outcomes. Right. So it's like that is what they're buying and that is what they're expecting. If it's not actually helping them, like again, I'm just going to go back to healthcare. I worked in financial services. It's the same deal. You know, they're looking at millions and millions of transactions per day. So the implications are massive, let alone all the regulatory concerns, right? You make one change, and if suddenly like, you could like we did this once, this was in the 90s, we made one change and suddenly like $50 million was not flowing through for that day. So you can imagine like everyone's was freaking out.
Yeah, and I think that to add on top of that, I think the prototyping part of like the speed of prototyping is super fast, and we can vibe code these super fast prototypes to validate with customers. There's a reality that your customers are busy. I mean, they're not going to have time for your daily validation of whatever thing you dreamed up this morning, right? So we have to be pragmatic and realistic, understand our customers, and figure out how we can get the right things in front of them. So like we said from the beginning, right? The speed of these things was never the problem. It's great that they're faster, but that was not the problem.
Okay, uh, we can go for another minute or two. Anyone else? I know like I probably have missed people's questions, and I know some folks have dropped. Anybody else has got a question? Just raise your hand, and you could be the last one if you want to ask a question. Going once, going twice. All right, cool. Well, then with that, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for joining. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. This was absolutely fantastic. Everyone, you'll obviously get the replay. It might take about 24 hours, but you will get it. You know how to get in touch with me and Daniel. I'll put our contact info in the email as well that you get. But other than that, everyone enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend. See you next time.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me, Shardul. This was great.
Bye.